On the night of November 14th, 1978, two brothers walked the tree line at the edge of their family's land in Jasper County, Texas, checking a trot line they had strung across a slough that fed into the Angelina National Forest. Wayne and Dale Holcomb were 12 years old, identical enough that their mother stitched a small red thread into Wayne's collar so she could tell them apart from the porch. They had grown up on that land. They knew the sound of the woods the way other children know the sound of their own house settling at night, which is why, when the light appeared low in the pines to the east and the frogs along the slough went quiet all at once, Dale Holcomb understood something before he had the words for it. He is 60 years old now, speaking about that night for the first time outside his own family. He says he knew, before he could explain to himself how he knew, that something was standing in the trees that did not belong to the woods he had known his entire life. Their father, Earl Holcomb, was in the shed behind the house repairing a chainsaw. Their mother, Sue Ellen, was at the stove. The nearest neighbor was the better part of a mile down the county road, a farmer named Otto Prégine, who kept goats and rarely came outside after dark. What happened over the next 40 minutes would be written into a sheriff's report that no longer contains its own middle pages, and into a family that has spent 46 years arguing quietly among themselves about how much of it should ever be told. If you're enjoying this story so far, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe. Drop a comment telling me where in the world you're watching from. I love hearing from you. Dale says the light did not move the way a flashlight moves, and it did not move the way headlights move through trees on a distant road. It held still. It sat maybe 40 yards into the pines, low, close to the ground, without a beam or a visible source, simply present the way a lamp left on in an empty room is present. He and Wayne stopped walking. Neither boy said anything for a long moment. Then Wayne set down the bucket he was carrying, slowly, the way a person sets something down when they intend to walk toward it, and Dale remembers grabbing for his brother's sleeve and missing. The slough itself seemed to hold its breath along with the frogs. Dale remembers noticing, in the strange clarity that fear sometimes produces, that the usual undertone of insects, the cicadas that ran continuously through Texas nights that time of year, had thinned to almost nothing, as though something in the air around them had quieted the whole tree line at once, rather than merely startled a few animals near the light. He has never been able to explain why he noticed the insects before he noticed anything else. He says now that his body understood the wrongness of the scene before his mind had caught up to it, the way a hand pulls back from a stove before the brain has finished registering heat. What Wayne described afterward, in fragments, over years, and what Dale is now willing to put in order for the first time, is a figure standing at the edge of the light, roughly 4 feet in height, with limbs that seemed too long for the rest of it, and a head too large for the shoulders beneath it. The skin, Wayne said, was grey in the way old rope is grey, not smooth like plastic, and not dull like ash, something in between that he never found a better word for. The eyes were dark, without visible whites, set wide and slightly angled, and Wayne told his brother, decades later, in one of the only conversations they ever had about it directly, that the eyes did not blink the way a person's eyes blink. They simply held on him. There was no sound from the figure itself. Wayne told his brother, no rustle of branches beneath it, and no crack of a twig, though the ground beneath the pines that time of year was thick with dry needles that announced even a rabbit's passage. It did not appear to be looking around the way a person or an animal looks around a clearing. It appeared, Wayne said, to already know exactly where it was and exactly who was standing in front of it. He never described any words passing between them, no voice and no sound he could identify as language, only a certainty that grew in him, standing there, that turning back was no longer a choice available to him in the way it had been 30 seconds earlier. Dale followed for perhaps 20 yards before his legs stopped working the way legs are supposed to work. He describes it not as fear exactly, though there was fear in it, but as a kind of weight settling into his chest and knees, a physical resistance that seemed to come from outside his own body rather than from within it. He called Wayne's name. He says Wayne turned his head, just his head, and looked back at him with an expression Dale had never seen on his brother's face before, and would spend the rest of his life trying to describe. Not fear, not confusion, something closer to recognition, as though Wayne had already understood something Dale had not yet been given. He says the ordinary sounds of the woods around him seemed to arrive late, as though he were hearing them through water, and that his own heartbeat, which he could feel clearly in his ears, did not seem to match the rhythm his body would have produced on its own. He has read, in the years since, other accounts describing a similar sensation, a kind of dragging quality to time itself in the seconds before something happens that a person is not prepared to witness, and he says the word that has always fit best for him is submerged, though he was standing on dry ground the entire time. Then the light folded inward on itself, Dale says, the way a photograph curls when it burns from one corner, and both the light and the figure and his brother were gone from where they had been standing. For several seconds afterward, Dale says he did not move at all. The clearing where the light had been was simply pine trees again, ordinary and dark, and the frogs along the slough, he remembers distinctly, did not start back up right away. It took what felt to him like a long while, though he has no way of knowing how long it actually was, before the first single frog called out, tentative, and then another, until the sound built back to what it had been before any of it started. He has never been able to shake the sense that the woods themselves were waiting to see what would happen before deciding it was safe to make noise again. Dale ran. He does not remember the run itself, only the porch light coming into view, and his own voice, which he says did not sound like his voice, calling for his father. Earl Holcomb came out of the shed, still holding a wrench. Sue Ellen came out onto the porch with flour still on her hands. Dale told them what he had seen in pieces that made no sense in the order he gave them, and it took Earl almost 10 minutes standing in his own front yard, according to Sue Ellen's later account, before he understood that his other son was somewhere out in the dark, and had been for the better part of an hour. Earl Holcomb called Otto Prejean first, then the Jasper County Sheriff's Office. A deputy named Roy Fontenot arrived a little after 10 o'clock that night with 2 other men, and by midnight there were 11 people combing the tree line with flashlights and dogs borrowed from a hunting camp 2 miles east. They searched through the night. They found nothing along the slough, nothing near the trotline, nothing in the stretch of pine where Dale said the light had been. Roy Fontenot later told a cousin of the family, off the record and years afterward, that he had never in his career seen a search organize itself so quickly in Jasper County, and that something about Earl Holcomb's voice on the telephone that night had convinced him within the first minute that this was not a case of a boy wandering off to avoid a chore. The dogs, borrowed from a hunting guide named Wilton Broussard, worked the tree line for nearly 4 hours without once catching a scent past the spot where Dale said the light had stood, a detail Broussard mentioned to more than one person over the years, and which the family did not learn about until decades later. At 6:14 the following morning, a log truck driver named Carl Deshotel found Wayne Holcomb sitting at the edge of a logging road, 9 miles from the family's land, on the far side of a stretch of forest that had no maintained trail connecting it to where the boys had been standing the night before. Wayne was not injured. He was not wearing his shoes, which were never recovered, and his clothes were dry despite a light rain that had fallen for part of the night. He did not appear cold. When Deshotel approached him, Wayne looked up and, according to the statement Deshotel gave the sheriff's office that same morning, said only, "I was trying to walk back," though he could not say where back was supposed to be, or explain 9 miles of forest crossed without shoes in a single night by a 12-year-old boy. By the time Carl Deshotel's radio call reached the search party at the logging road, most of the searchers had been on their feet for 8 hours without rest. Earl Holcomb, according to 2 of the men who were with him that morning, ran the last quarter mile on foot ahead of his own truck when he saw his son sitting at the tree line, and did not speak a single word for several minutes after reaching him, only knelt in the wet dirt and held onto Wayne's shoulders while the boy sat there, calm in a way that Earl later told his brother-in-law had unsettled him more than tears would have. Dr. Abernathy, who treated patients in Jasper County for nearly 4 decades, told Sue Ellen privately that he had never in his career had a patient present in that particular combination, dehydrated as though from prolonged exertion, yet without a single blister, scrape, or insect bite anywhere on either foot, despite 9 miles of unbroken East Texas timberland between where the boys had last been seen together and where Wayne was found. He recorded the observation. He did not offer an explanation for it, and none of the family ever asked him to try. If you're hooked on this story, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss an upload. Your support means everything and helps me bring you more emotional stories like this one. Wayne was taken to a clinic in the town of Jasper, examined by a physician named Lyle Abernathy, who found him in what his own notes described as good general condition, alert, cooperative, without visible trauma, and mildly dehydrated. Sue Ellen Holcomb kept a photocopy of that first page of the exam notes for the rest of her life, tucked into a Bible in the front hall closet. She never obtained the second page. When her nephew, Wayne and Dale's cousin Michael, attempted in 2011 to request Wayne's full pediatric record from the clinic's successor practice, he was told the file for that specific date range had been transferred during a records migration in the 1990s and could not be located, though the file immediately before it and the file immediately after it, from the same physician, were both intact and produced within a week of his request. Something else happened at the clinic that morning that the family did not discuss for a long time. According to Earl Holcomb, in an account he gave his brother-in-law some years before his own death, and which was passed down to Dale, 2 men in plain clothing arrived at the clinic before noon, identifying themselves only as being attached to the Air Force Office of Special Investigations, with an office, they said, out of Barksdale. They asked to speak with Wayne alone. Earl refused. They asked instead to speak with Earl and Sue Ellen together, in a small side room, while Wayne remained with Dr. Abernathy's nurse. The conversation lasted, by Earl's account, close to 40 minutes. The men asked detailed questions about the light, about its color and duration, about whether either boy had touched anything on the ground afterward, and about a Polaroid photograph Earl had taken of Wayne's bare feet that morning, which showed a faint discoloration across both soles that Dr. Abernathy had noted but not explained. The men asked to see the photograph. Earl handed it to them so they could look at it. They did not hand it back. Earl told his brother-in-law that one of the men said, in a tone Earl described as courteous but final, that the photograph would need to be retained as part of an evaluation, and that the family would be contacted if there were any findings relevant to their son's health. No one from any office ever contacted the Holcomb family again. When Deputy Fontenot's original incident report was requested by Dale in 2019 through an open records request filed with the Jasper County Sheriff's Office, the file that came back was 7 pages. Fontenot's handwritten field notes, referenced by page number in the typed summary, were not among them. The gap is not explained anywhere in the file. What comes before it and what comes after it are both intact. Wayne Holcomb was, by every account his family gives, a different boy after that November. Not withdrawn exactly, and not troubled in any way a school counselor ever flagged, but quieter, in a manner Sue Ellen described late in her life as a kind of listening that never fully turned off. He stopped hunting with his father, an activity he had loved before that night, without ever explaining why. He developed a habit, which lasted into adulthood, of sitting very still in rooms, with the lights off, not sleeping, simply sitting. Dale says that for years afterward, Wayne would sometimes go rigid in the middle of an ordinary conversation, staring past whoever was speaking to him for a few seconds before returning, and that he always apologized afterward, without ever explaining what had happened. This kind of account does not stand alone in the record, though very few researchers have connected it to what happened in Jasper County. In the autumn of 1969, outside Somerset, Kentucky, a 10-year-old boy named Curtis Renfro went missing from his family's tobacco farm for 6 hours, during a night his older sister later described as unusually still, without the sound of insects that normally filled the property after dark. Curtis was found the following morning sitting at the edge of a neighboring field, disoriented, his shoes missing, unable to account for where he had been. County records from that period show a visit to the family home by two men from an unspecified federal office within days of the incident, a visit the family was reportedly told not to discuss, and a portion of the local sheriff's log for that week that is now missing from the courthouse archive. Curtis's sister, interviewed decades later by a regional folklore researcher who had no knowledge of the Holcomb account, described her brother afterward as unusually still for a boy his age, prone to long silences that had not been part of his character before that autumn, a description she gave using almost the same words Sue Ellen Holcomb would later use for Wayne, though neither family had ever heard of the other. A second account, further from Jasper County but strikingly similar in its shape, comes from Prineville, Oregon, in the spring of 1983. A 15-year-old named Patricia Vance was separated from her cousin during an evening walk near a logging road and was found nearly 5 hours later, almost 11 miles from where she had last been seen, again without shoes, again dry despite rain that had fallen through most of the night. Her family reported a visit from unidentified officials within 48 hours, and a physical item, in this case a strand of what her mother described as unusually fine metallic thread found caught in her daughter's hair, that was collected and never returned. Patricia Vance, now in her 50s, has declined public comment on the incident for most of her adult life, though a family friend recalls her saying once, at a wedding many years later, that she still checked her own daughter's hair for anything unusual after they had been outside after dark, a habit she never fully explained and never abandoned. None of these three families has ever spoken to one another. Dale Holcomb learned of the Kentucky and Oregon accounts only through a retired investigator named Harlan Spear, who had catalogued uncorroborated reports of children found miles from where they disappeared, without shoes, for the better part of 30 years, largely as a private undertaking that he shared with almost no one until Dale reached out to him in the months after Wayne's death. What is consistent across all three accounts is not simply the missing footwear or the unexplained distance covered in a single night. It is the visit that follows within days, calm, official in tone, requesting a single physical item connected to the child's body, and the quiet absence, afterward, of any file, log, or record that might have explained who those men actually were. Wayne Holcomb married in 1989, worked for 31 years as a lineman for an East Texas utility cooperative, and raised two daughters who both describe him, now, as a good and steady father who almost never spoke about his own childhood. His wife Carol married him without ever hearing the full account of that November, and says now that she understood only that there was a part of her husband that stayed permanently guarded, a room in him she was never given a key to, and that she came, over 3 decades of marriage, to respect the door rather than push against it. He kept one object his entire adult life that no one in the family could explain, a smooth grey stone, slightly warm to the touch according to both his daughters, kept in a cigar box in his workshop and shown to almost no one. He told his younger daughter only once, when she was 9 years old and had found the box while looking for a screwdriver, that he had carried that stone with him every single day since he was 12, and that he did not know exactly why, only that he felt something was wrong on the days he forgot it at home. Wayne Holcomb died in March of 2023, of causes unrelated to that November night, at the age of 56. In the final weeks, according to his daughter, he began speaking more openly than he ever had before, not in the form of a confession exactly, but in the form of small, precise details offered without prompting, as though a door that had been held shut for most of a lifetime was finally allowed to drift open on its own. He told her that what he remembered most clearly, more than the figure or the light, was a sensation of being shown something, briefly and without words, that he described only as a shape too large to hold in his mind all at once, something he said he had spent 45 years trying and failing to forget. Dale Holcomb has spent the 2 years since his brother's death deciding whether to speak. He still lives less than a mile from the land where they grew up. He still walks the same tree line some mornings, and he says the woods have never again made the frogs go silent the way they did that one November night, though he has waited for it, in a way he is not entirely comfortable admitting, every single year since. He kept his brother's cigar box. The stone is still inside it. He has not had it examined by anyone, and for now he says he does not intend to. Dale says he decided to speak now because his own grandchildren are close to the age he and Wayne were that November, and because he no longer wants the only record of what happened to his brother to be a stitched red thread in a collar, a missing page in a clinic file, and a handful of pages that vanished from a sheriff's report before anyone thought to make a copy. He is not asking anyone to believe him. He says only that he was there, that his brother was there, and that only one of them walked back into that house whole. What he will say, plainly, without the hedge his family has carried for 46 years, is this: something walked out of those pines on the night of November 14th, 1978, and it did not give his brother back whole. Whatever came home 9 miles away at 6:14 the following morning had been changed by whatever those 40 minutes actually were, in a way that no doctor's note, no sheriff's report, and no quiet visit from men who never gave their names was ever able to explain, or was ever meant to. Dale still keeps the cigar box on a shelf in his own workshop now, in the same spot Wayne once kept it. Some mornings, walking the tree line toward the slough, he says he still finds himself listening for the frogs to stop, the way they stopped that one November night 46 years ago, before he has any reason to expect that they will. Thank you so much for watching until the end. If you loved this story, check out the other videos on your screen now. I think you'll really enjoy them. And don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already. See you in the next story.